The following episode contains or may contain spoilers, so if you're spoiler sensitive, maybe beware.
Yeah, you sensitive people.
Get out.
No, get in.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
This is issue number 94. Baphomet from the Wicked and the Divine is selected by our present level patron, Ruby. Thank you so much, Ruby, for letting us delve into the world of the Wicked and the Divine. And this issue and this episode is special, not just for a number of reasons, not the least of which because it is our first foray into the Wicked and the Divine universe on a character level, but also because we have a very special guest with us. We'd like to welcome Jered from the Fantom Zone podcast. Jered, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm glad to be here. I'm the guest. That's what I'm doing here right now.
You are the guest. So as the rule was in my house growing up as a kid, I don't know about you, but you're the guest. So we have to play whatever games you want to play. We have to do whatever it is that you want to do because you're the guest.
Cool, Nintendo. Let's do it.
Yes. Love it. Love
Perfect.
it. So Jared, before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about the Fantom Zone podcast, where folks can find you, all that good stuff.
Well, okay. I am a Brooklyn stand-up comic, so that's unfortunate for everybody here. That's too bad. Not least of which because stand-up comedy doesn't happen anymore, so I don't know what I am anymore. I decided I'm just going to write a werewolf novel instead. So that's what I'm doing. The Fantom Zone is my podcast. I have it with two other people, Noah and Kayla. And we basically, as opposed to the smart thing that your podcast did, which was have like an intelligent sort of like specific lens, we were like, let's just do all comics. And so we decided to do that. But our approach is kind of a 101 thing. We like to take different sort of concepts or themes and then like, sort of like, have a kind of 101 attitude, say, this is what we love about comics. And it's really good, we think, for the person that's like getting into comic books, but doesn't necessarily have that encyclopedia level sort of knowledge that puts them somewhere on the spectrum, if you know what I'm saying. So that's what we do. So you should listen to it.
Well, we do. I do anyway.
I'm glad to hear that.
I definitely.
Yep, and I made sure that I did the polite thing and listened to some episodes. I mean, I listened to every single one. Yes, of course.
You have a problem.
I'm subscribed. I am subscribed. I confess I haven't listened to you guys in a while, only because I typically listen to podcasts on my commute to work. And as my commute for the past 6 months has been a 30-second walk from my bedroom to my living room.
So I listen to your podcast a lot up until the point that I recognized in the beginning, it says that you're not my therapist, which I was like, why am I listening to this now? If you're not doing any therapy, I thought I was going to fix myself, but apparently I'm just supposed to be entertained. But it is entertaining. So I'm glad.
¿Por qué no los dos? You know, we get a little bit of both.
Hey, I don't charge you. Remember that.
It's true.
Yeah, that's true. It is for free. Last bit of housekeeping real fast. As of this morning, we are now, or as of the release of this episode, we are now live with our nominees for our 100th episode award show. So that is coming up in just a couple of weeks. And so if you go to capesonthecouch.live/nominees, you will find the link there where you can vote on the nominees for several of the categories. Thank you to all the fans who previously submitted nominees. Doc and I took your suggestions and we also added some of our own. And so we've got the nominees up in a variety of categories. And the 100th episode is not just an award show, it's also going to be a mailbag. So there will be a section on the page that you can fill out any questions you would like to ask. It's sort of like an AMA. You can ask about the show. You can ask about characters. You can ask about me, Doc, any old topic, and we will answer them as honestly and as sincerely. And we'll do the thing where we don't really look at the questions. We just sort of like open them up and then answer. So there will be no, much like this show, there will be no thinking in advance. It's all going to be off the seat of our pants. Even more so than usual. At least we put like maybe a half hour's worth of thought and work into this show, normally speaking. The 100th episode is going to be no forethought. It's just going to be brain, mouth, words.
Nice.
So very much looking forward to that. So Baphomet from The Wicked and the Divine, as we will learn, Baphomet is one of several names this particular character has gone by. So Baphomet, created by Kieron, Gillen, Jamie McKelvie, and Matthew Wilson in The Wicked and the Divine, #2. He did not make his debut in the initial issue, but he was in #2, July of 2014. He makes his debut in the London Underground, holding the severed head of the Morrigan, who is one of the other gods in the Pantheon. I'm not going to give you a whole rundown, but I do think it's important for those of you who are unfamiliar with the world of The Wicked and the Divine. Every 90 years, 12 gods are resurrected, and they take the role of, in this instance, in 2014, this recurrence, as it's known, they are under the guise of pop stars. They live for 2 years, they become worldly famous, and then they die. And then 90 years later, they get resurrected again. And so this is one of the many recurrences. And so, as I said, as of 2014, all of these gods are resurrected as pop stars. And so Baphomet is this goth rocker. He's very much in the vein of Nick Cave. Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, for anybody who's familiar with that genre, that particular artist. Each of the gods is really styled after one or two very particular artists. And so Baphomet makes his debut in the book, holding the severed head of the Morrigan, who is another one of the pop stars. And so he makes a whole big show of it. And then he's interrupted by the Morrigan herself, who is not actually dead. And they fight until Laura intervenes. Laura is this fangirl. She's 17, and she is following all of the gods, all of the Pantheon, because she's obsessed with them. She wants to meet them. She wants to be one of them. Spoiler alert, she does in fact become one of them. So Baphomet learns of the Prometheus gambit, which is told to him by Ananke, who's sort of the caretaker of all of the gods. She oversees them, so to speak, and helps guide them into who they are. So he learns of this Prometheus gambit where a god can extend their life by killing another god. So Baphomet goes, well, I don't want to die, so I'll kill somebody else and I'll get their time added onto mine, so I get a little extra time. He initially targets Urdr, but then he gets stopped by the Morrigan. So then he focuses on Inanna instead. And as I said earlier, each of these gods are styled after pop stars. Inanna is Prince. There's just like some of them you're like, oh, this could be so-and-so. This is like an amalgamation. No, Inanna is Prince. Full stop. So it's later revealed that he didn't in fact kill Inanna. And so the two of them decided to go visit Laura. They witnessed Laura's transformation into Persephone. And it's believed from the reader's perspective that immediately after Laura turns into Persephone, Ananke kills her. Turns out she doesn't kill Persephone. She kills Inanna. Baphomet takes Persephone to the underground to hide, which is this subterranean realm of darkness and whatnot that Baphomet uses to hide from the rest of the gods. I know I'm really doing a piss poor job of trying to summarize this because
it's okay.
The comic is so dense.
I think you're doing well.
Yeah. I mean, just to jump in, you can get the idea even when you mentioned the underground. The whole point is not all of these gods are, quote, benevolent gods that you would think of based on their mythology. So you're going to get some that are on the, quote, hellish side as opposed to the heavenly side, whatever. So yeah, that's pretty easy enough for anybody that's read any sort of fiction ever to understand.
Baphomet and the Morrigan are definitely on the darker side of the spectrum versus somebody like Baal, who we discussed when we did the Wicked and the Divine Volume 1 trade paperback review for our patrons. So if you're a patron, you already know the beginning of the story because we did a whole episode on it. Well, this obviously extends beyond that. But Baal he's a baller. He's a lightning god. He's very showy. He's very flashy. Lucifer is a woman who is David Bowie. Again, it's not even trying. Lucifer is David Bowie. And Baal is Kanye West.
Kanye, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Baal is absolutely Kanye West. So in any case, Baphomet takes Persephone to the underground to hide. So after sleeping with Persephone, he reveals that he's not actually the reincarnation of Baphomet. He's Nergal, who is a Mesopotamian god of the underworld. But he changed his name because he was ashamed of the association with Warhammer 40K.
Oh my God, I didn't know that. I've read it 3 times and I was like, why? I didn't get why what he was trying to not be or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole, he has a conversation with Persephone where he's like, imagine being resurrected as Thor and everybody gives you crap for not having perfect blonde hair.
The blonde and all
the
that.
hammer.
Yeah.
And he goes, Nergal is, I believe he refers to it as higher frequency geek, but it's the same thing. I've never played Warhammer 40K.
Interesting.
But
they even have him painting miniatures at one point.
Well, before he becomes a god, he was Cameron, a role-playing nerd in love with Marion. And Marion becomes the Morrigan. And again, I'm trying because
it's okay.
Because
You're
the
doing
story
great.
is told not necessarily in full chronological order. So I'm like, do I describe his chronological story and disregard the spoilers, or do I try and tell it in like publication order and then go back and do that? I'm doing my best, people, I swear. So he and Marion are a couple. So then he cheats on her. She gets pissed off. Ananke shows up, turns her into the Morrigan. She's still in love with him, though. She's still in love with Cameron. She convinces Ananke to turn him into a god. And he is pissed because he's already afraid of death. And now he finds out, A, you turned me into a god against my will, and B, I'm going to die in 2 years? Who the hell do you think you are? So Persephone kills Ananke because, spoiler alert, she's the villain of the whole thing. So, or one of the villains, I should say, as we later find out, but I'm not going to get into that because it's not really relevant to Baphomet's story.
And
so
you,
Baphomet
and you
Morrigan,
meant Ananke is the villain.
Yes.
Not Persephone.
Right.
Yes. I'm sorry. Yeah. Just to clarify, Ananke is the villain, not Persephone. Well, Persephone chose the line a little bit.
Oh, don't they all?
Yeah.
Because
yeah,
none of these characters are pure. I'll just put it that way. So he and Morrigan resume their relationship, which turns very abusive towards him. Morrigan becomes very controlling and physically abusive. And he's like, no, but I know that she loves me. Which is, I mean, really just beautiful, dark and twisted fantasy, right? We're just talking about Kanye.
Yeah.
And so he later discovers that Morrigan wanted him to become a god so they could kill and resurrect each other forever, that they could just go through the cycle of just one would kill the other and then resurrect and kill and resurrect because she's not all there herself. Morrigan, by the way, because I haven't mentioned this because it wasn't relevant up until now, Morrigan has 3 altars. There's the Morrigan, there's Badb, B-A-D-B, and Sweet Annie. And so it's like three people in one. And so each of them has a very different aspect of their persona. So here's a sentence that is not going to make sense to anybody unless you've read the comic. Baphomet kills the Morrigan's 3 altars to provide bodies for the disembodied heads of Lucifer, Inanna, and Tara. Tara.
That's a perfectly normal English sentence. Wait, you've just said.
Read the books, people. That's all I can tell you. They're phenomenal. It's gorgeous.
We did our review
raved about them.
Yeah, when we reviewed Volume 1, we said, oh, this is definitely something you need to read. No question about it.
Absolutely.
Can I just add, I was going to just read the first 2 and then read the wiki, and I read the entire series in 3 days. It's fantastic.
It is. Yeah. It's glorious. So Baphomet sacrifices his brain to bring back Dionysus, who is brain dead in a hospital. And that is just like, it's such a heart-wrenching scene.
I was going to say, I know we have to give summaries, but the evolution of the character to that point was powerful, in my opinion. So just,
absolutely.
I know you're saying it for the sake of just giving the information, but man, oh man, that was well done.
Because by that point, he's going by Cameron because he has changed and grown so much. And I just love personally, I mean, I don't think it's unusual to say that character growth is such a wonderful thing to see in any work of fiction. But when it's done like this, when it's organic and it's compelling, and then the character is given such a beautiful ending that is true to the character, where they are at that moment, and then you look back on where they were when they started and you go, how did we get here from there? But it all makes sense and it all tracks. It's beautiful.
There's something about that too, about just in the writing, where there's this question about whether Baphomet / Nurgle, like what his character development is, because in some ways the development is our perception of him, not him entirely. I mean, there's definitely growth for sure, but like there's a moment when we find out that he didn't kill Inanna, and we realize that he's not the complete ghoul that we were led to believe. And as a matter of fact, from a literary perspective, I think it's brilliant because it's a tremendous misdirect. We see this thing who's a death god, mischievous. He has all the trappings of a Gary Oldman character. And then you find out like, he's not really going to be our villain. It's a fantastic move, you know?
Yeah, it is. It's a beautiful swerve. And it's used even in universe that he's blamed for multiple deaths of members of the Pantheon. Why do they blame him? Because he's Baphomet, because he's got the goat head and the horns and he's dark and twisted and everything. So he must be the bad guy. And you get it because, I mean, from his first entrance, like he shows up with the head of the Morrigan and he spends the whole time being a dick to everybody. And then you slowly start to peel back and you realize he is so scared that it's a defense mechanism. And so that's like a perfect segue into the issues. He is scared. He is a death god who is afraid of dying. And just from a dramatic irony standpoint, it's just like chef's kiss, beautiful, the way that he's written. And so, Jered, I'll turn it over to you, and then we'll let Doc talk about it. But what were some of the things that really struck you about Baphomet, Nurgle, Cameron, over the evolution of the character, as to how he starts off as being so insecure and scared of himself and scared of death and who he is and what he's become, to where he eventually ends up?
Yeah, I mean, I think one, they're all kind of afraid of dying. It's this sort of like frequent part of this book that sort of Damocles is sort of hanging over all of their thread. And in the book, Ananke tells Baphomet / Nurgle about this possibility of evading it or something like that. So then he has to go after it. But I'm more interested, honestly, I wouldn't suggest he's not afraid to die. I think they all are. But I'm interested in this sort of impulsive attitude he has, where she knows about him that if I tell him this, he's the one that's going to act out on it. And there's something really fascinating. Look, I spent a lot of time in reading about Nurgle and what he's really like, the mythology. And what's really interesting about Nurgle is that he's the god, he's almost a destroyer god more than a death god. He's a destroyer god who is ruled by impulse and beyond reason. So not to redeem, not to be sadistic, he's like sort of destructive because it's in his basic nature. And there's something brilliant about him going and doing this thing and then realizing he's not sort of ignoble. And I think the impulse runs out and he decides not to do it. He's very chaotic. And I love that about the character.
Yeah. Doc?
Wow. I could have sworn you said that you don't have intelligent conversations brought to your podcast, because that was an excellent point.
It's
done.
Always smart to tell people you're dumb. Always.
Amen. I've lived by that for much of my life. To expound upon that, and I'll be blunt. You just gave me an education on Nurgle, the mythology of it itself.
He's great.
I mean, I'm familiar with Baphomet, but also to get back to Anthony's point as well, when it comes to humanity, we all have a sense of finality. We know that we have a certain amount of time. There's, though, this roulette component. We don't know when. We have no idea. We have a general vague notion that it's going to be, at least for the people that are on this podcast, hopefully years and years from now, as opposed to if we're talking to someone in their 80s or 90s, they know that their time is finite in theory. And in this case, we have people that have set deadlines. It's a contract, basically. So when you have that, I kind of draw the parallel to someone, let's say, unfortunately, and we can relate it to the whole comics and geekdom in general with someone like Chadwick Boseman that just died. He was 43 years old. If you had that idea, if you said you have stage 4 cancer, you know you're only going to have maybe not as definite as 2 years, but you know it's going to be relatively short. That's going to change your perspective on just about everything you do from that point forward. In other words, you're going to, in theory, put more energy and effort into certain interactions and certain things that you probably didn't prioritize as much before because you thought you were going to have more time to do them later. You're going to push them to the forefront. You're going to do them now. You're going to take those chances that you wouldn't have taken in theory because you had so much more. You didn't want to lose everything. It's like, well, now what do you have to lose? Everything just gets completely turned around. So for someone like him, you already have that human nature of being afraid of what the unknown is, what the end is, because once again, they're gods per se, but a lot of us in general still struggle with the idea of an afterlife and all sorts of things. So we still don't know what's going on with that. You throw all that into the mix and say, by the way, all of this stuff that you thought you had the opportunity to just like push to the wayside, it's now being drawn to you at a moment in time that you never expect. So in that sense, the amount of anxiety, and he goes through the full gamut of what I think are the stages of grief, like just, temporary depression. Yeah.
Processes it super quickly.
Yeah.
It's actually really fascinating. Do you remember what Inanna says to him in a way, I think, that prevents his own murder? Do you remember this? I thought I read it twice.
Tell Baal that I loved him?
No, well, that too. That's a very sweet thing. But I thought it was compelling because he says, and I think this is maybe how he processes this, is like, it's not going to matter. Like, you can have a year, you can have another year, but you're not living now. Like, you think you're going to be happy if you make it 2 more years, if you make 3 more years. It's a profound statement. And I think it comes out of a lot of mythology, which people realize very quickly. If life is just about living longer, if just extending it, then if it's only about how many moments I get and like the pleasure points on those moments, if that's all I've got, then it's eventually going to be pointless anyway. So there's something really smart about this character saying, look, I'm not, even though it was my inclination, like them or me, I'm not going to kill anybody because it really ultimately wouldn't create any more meaning. There'd be no point.
Yeah. It's the ultimate anti-nihilist argument.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And quality over quantity.
And Doc, I mean, I got a lump in my throat when you brought up Chadwick Boseman. That hit me. That death hit me very hard. And I can only imagine the impact that it had on a number of our listeners and you as well. I know we had.
That was that was pretty darn hard. But to the same point, up until his death, I mean, he didn't have much of a social presence for the last few months, but even the last video that anybody ever saw of him, I didn't even know that existed. And when I saw it, I realized like, oh, this is a man, and it is directly related to this topic. Like, this is a man that knows that his time is short. So whatever energy he has, okay, he'll do what he can to put it forward with something that he thinks is worthwhile, and darn the consequences. And the fact,
give me 43 Chadwick Boseman years over the 900 years that Dick Cheney is going to live on the 900 hearts that he's taken from children. Way better.
True story. Absolutely. Yeah. I will not argue with you there.
Yep.
So the next issue is something that I had started off with, an idea that I had, and then Ruby made a suggestion in the Discord as to some of the things that she wanted us to discuss. He postures as to what he thinks masculinity should look like, as well as what he thinks Morrigan wants. He starts off, Cameron is this role-playing nerd. He's, I don't want to say shy, but he's got that, he embraces the geekdom. And then on another level, then you have Baphomet / Nurgle, who never wears a shirt. The abs are open. He's, very much about the physique, and it's all about the posturing. It's all about the presentation and the style and everything. And it is such a change from who he was to who he ends up becoming, that the contrast is just startling. So I don't know who wants to take that first, but it's just from the masculinity standpoint, because I know that there's another issue that we're going to get to in a little bit, but it's just a masculinity issue.
Yeah. Well, for just about every derivative that we can think of, time ad infinitum, is aggression is maledom. That's what we are. And any way that you can display that, all the better. So whatever the modern zeitgeist is, that's what you're going to see. That was the whole point of it. In my opinion, that part is pretty simple. The fact that it's his perception of what that should be is even greater, because, to make the Spinal Tap reference, he takes it to 11. It's not just whether or not he's looking at, I don't just need to be a male. I don't need to be an alpha male. I need to be the alpha and the omega, and make sure that I take the spotlight. And if anybody questions it, I will find some way to either humiliate them or destroy them or whatever. Just to give that impression. That's the thing, the perception of it, just the display. Similar to, a lot of animals in the animal kingdom, the way they show certain ways that they know that they are the most fit for whatever you want to call it, be it mating or companionship or all that stuff, if you want to get the most base biological point of it. So I think that's well shown. And whether or not that was the appropriate approach to dealing with someone like Morrigan, I'm going to leave until the next issue that you want to discuss. But yeah, I feel like this is what every pre-adolescent or adolescent guy starts to think about. Maybe not in the rock star category, or whether you're talking about the other characters and their ways of flashing it or whatever. This is what we come to think about. I'm going to say in modern Western culture. I don't know if all other cultures around the world do that, but I know it's pretty clear for most of us growing up that this is what was portrayed the most.
Yeah. Jered?
Well, I was going to say, I think I read it not differently than Doc, but differently than the original question. I don't see Baphomet, especially in terms of the group of characters he falls in, as being overly masculine in the toxic sense. He's clearly got a lot of toxicity, but I was thinking, I actually think Bale's more into the sort of aggressive, warlike, direct kind of character. I think with Baphomet, there's a sort of like the incel who becomes hyper-sexualized and sexy, like his fantasy. I mean, the abs and stuff like that. The abs and the sort of like open sexual grandiosity, that reads way more of like, I can get laid now. I want to be sexualized, rather than I want to dominate and I want to beat people up or something like that. And interestingly enough, if you guys know, I'm just going to add a little bit more mythology here. They make reference in it. Baphomet wasn't a god. Right? That's what Urdr says that about. Baphomet is a fake kind of like it dates back to the Knights Templar, and then it was picked up by a bunch of sort of like people like Crowley and Anton LaVey, and associated with Satanism. So it's itself the fiction. There's something really fascinating about the idea that he's the only character that comes like onto the scene, and rather than to be the god he actually is, take on this like fictional persona or something like that.
Okay, I didn't know how to shoehorn that in, but that is a wonderful point, because the whole Baphomet thing with the Templars was perhaps even a miscommunication when, during the Crusades, they were dealing with Islam in such a high standard that there's a translation of Muhammad that kind of like, it was a miscommunication. In other words, the translation for Muhammad can also mean other god or false god. So
by the way, how lovely are you to call it that instead of it being a racist caricature? So you're right. I just think it's even, it goes further. It's probably a really...
You're right. You're right. And well, the whole point is it led to a lot of discrimination amongst people that in theory were trying to just do their damn job for the people that, sent them out to fight in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
But I digress a little bit. But just the fact that you brought up that history, that's an amazing point. But also, I think that does relate back to the character a bit, because you already mentioned the idea of an incel now getting to live this kind of hyper-sexualized world. It also points out that what are people's expectations of someone in that position? In other words, can I really tone it down? What happens then?
Yeah.
I can't exactly just say like, oh well, you know what, I'm gonna not tour as much, or I need to take a sabbatical. Like no one's gonna really react to that. So it does kind of shoehorn him in, and I think a lot of people end up in those circumstances where they're like, I have a good thing going here, so what's my exit strategy? How do I turn this off? Well, in theory, they die. Also, I mean, that's that.
To defend him a little bit, he's the high summer sun that scorched the earth. This is the burning god who went down into the underworld to dominate. And don't get me wrong, I'm not. There's nothing wrong. There's something problematic about overly indulging that, but they're going to be dead in 2 years. Like some boldness is to be expected. Like, do we hope they were going to sit at home and wear cardigan sweaters for 2 years and like have like soft British commentary? Like, no, of course it's going to be some bigness and things like that. So he's ends up being profoundly more in touch with himself in a certain way. To Doc's sort of like expertise, and I'm sure we're going to get to this, to a point maybe like where he becomes codependent and it itself becomes its own pathology. So.
Well, I was literally just about to say, let's just dive right into the next topic, which is his relationship with the Morrigan, which starts off when they are Cameron and Marion. His parents die, which leaves him incredibly distraught. So then he cheats on Marion because now he's hurt, he's lashing out, and there is certainly some codependency there prior to the recurrence, prior to their ascendance as gods. And then when Marion becomes the Morrigan, then she pleads with Ananke to say, please, he should be one of us. And so Ananke's like, okay, I'll give this to you. And he didn't want that. He didn't want to become the god. He didn't want this power. And I know that we talk all the time about, Doc and I talk a lot about the notion of heroes that end up with powers that they don't want. He's not only got the god that he doesn't want, but now the death in 2 years. But back to the relationship with the Morrigan, it then becomes abusive from a woman to a man. And I know we discussed at length when we did Hank Pym, we talked about the stereotypical, we talked about the slap and we talked about the stereotypical male abusing the woman. This is and I don't want to describe it like this, but it's such a well depicted instance of domestic abuse from a male perspective that we don't often see in fiction. And a lot of times when we do see domestic abuse from a male perspective, it's from he's henpecked or he's it strips him away of his masculinity. It strips him away of his agency. And the woman is painted as this domineering type person. And it's played for comedy. There's no comedy here. There's no humor in this. It's all done dramatically. And I just want to get your takes on this again from two men, what it felt like to read domestic abuse from a male perspective.
Well, first of all, thank you for calling me a man. That's what a compliment. But no, it's honestly, what's interesting to me, given some of the context, Kieron Gillen's super smart here. This is also, among other things, a smart feminist move. It's a retelling of the mythology itself. If you don't know, and most people didn't, and I didn't 2 days ago. Anyway, Nergal gets his underworld kingdom by invading it essentially on request and threatening to cut off the head of this god Erish Kagal, who was like the death goddess or something like that. And so he begins in a kind of like the despoiler of the queen, kind of like aggressive, again, the threat of violence against women. And so I think Kieron Gillen sort of turned that on its head and now made him the sort of abused character. I as far as the implications, I mean, I think that like a lot of codependents, his notion is that he's trying to save her, that he think like it's this sort of pathological self-sacrifice. I love her so much, she hurts me, but who would she have without me? Kind of a thing. And again, I mean, now what are the implications of making man, the guy who's generally the more domestic abuser, the victim here? I don't know. I mean, I think some people would say maybe that sort of like shines a light away from the issues that really need more light on them. On the other end, it's also a really sort of smart sort of take on the fact that the patriarchy is dangerous to everybody. It's bad and toxic for men as well. So I don't know. It's as I really, if it wasn't for this podcast, I wouldn't have gone back and really thought that through. And I think it's a tremendously interesting move.
Well, thank you, by the way, for also before, I don't want to cut Doc off. I'll let you get to it in a sec, but I read briefly about the marriage of Erish Kagal and Nurgle. And it's basically, he ends up being forced to marry the goddess of death, and now he's trapped underground, which is what happens with Morrigan. So it's this beautiful, like, extra meta layer.
Yeah,
that,
well, I mean, if you want to, right? But if you want to add that extra layer, you have someone like Persephone that ends up in the underground, which is exactly what happens to her in Greek mythology in the first place. So there are so many ways that they did a great job just incorporate so many of these different cultural mythologies in just a wonderful run. Anyway, to get back to the other point, first of all, I apologize as a physician. I want to make sure I make this statement that if any of our listeners, if any of this resonates with you or disturbs you, or you're in a situation where you feel like you relate closer than you thought you would, then there is definitely help out there. Rather than trying to give lots of esoteric ideas, in the United States it's 911, and in your country, wherever you are, you'll know the equivalent number. So I'll just get that out of the way right now. To get back to more nuance to the topic, I think Jered hit it right on the head, that this is a situation where when someone is truly codependent, the idea is that I bring something to the table, you bring something to the table, and there is no way that either one of us could survive without the other. The problem with, I'm not going to say well, I will. It's one-way abuse. The problem with any abusive relationship, whether it's male to female, female to male, same genders, or even within families, parental abuse, workplace violence, all of it, it's power. If there's a difference in power, regardless of the perception that things are different, then that's usually where violence begets violence. And in a case like this, it's very clear that Morrigan had her own idea of what a relationship should be. And the second that plan for a relationship was destroyed, and in this case, I think the main impotence was the sexual activity involving Baphomet. And I'm not advocating cheating, by the way. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the idea that her dream wasn't happening the way that she thought it would. And she had no mature way of handling that. And therefore, she reacts in a way that is incredibly destructive. And Baphomet has no proper coping mechanism at the time to figure out how to exit what's clearly an abusive relationship. And so he stays. It ends up in this cycle that everyone else around him sees, and that in my clinical experience, I've seen it to the point where it's delusional, where staff in my hospital have been attacked because they called adult protective services for the sake of protecting the person that was being abused. And the person being abused attacked the staff. That is how defensive a person can be about this. So I think that's independent of gender. But to bring it back to the previous topic that we had, the expectation of masculinity in certain circumstances can influence that even greater, because now it's not just I lack the power in the relationship, it's I lack the power of the general societal expectations of what I'm supposed to be. So you add that on top.
Yeah, you're adding shame at that point,
Yeah.
which is which is far worse. Absolutely. Yeah, I think I also wanted to add, and I think Doc will appreciate this, that there's this problem also that all pathologies have some basis in normal psychology. And there are oftentimes exaggerations. You think of like cancer being the growth of a healthy cell. And the reason I think certain people are so susceptible to codependent relationships is because they look a lot like when we talk about love. We talk about great commitment. I mean, like, being in love. Well, of course I'm supposed to be miserable. Of course it's hard. Like if I'm doing this for the person that I love and things like that. And I think that's also why he's such a charming character. Because, it's like, oh, look how committed he is. Look how sacrificial he is and things like that. And then we get this really smart version of like, okay, yes, but take these beautiful traits and now put them in this awful context. And you see exactly how poisonous they can be. Yeah, it's again. I keep saying this and then being like, man, it's a good work, huh? Man, what a good story it is. But it's very good.
No, but you're absolutely right. Anything can be beautiful from a certain perspective, and I think it's a testament to the writing that we get to see that, and that we're getting to have this discussion about how something like the sacrifice and something about like the devotion to someone can be so destructive. Something so intended to be so beautiful can be so destructive.
It's I love you so much, I'm willing to destroy both of us. But that's how much I love you. I mean, that's how this stuff gets conceived. It's dark.
Oh, definitely. And, again, Morrigan is literally keeping him prisoner at one point in the underground. Like, and then later on in the stories, like she's forbidding anybody from seeing him. As soon as she finds out he's even talking to Persephone, she flips her lid. And it's just that nature of control. It's for Morrigan, it's I love you so much. I want the best for you. I'm not going to let anything ruin you. You are so beautiful. You are so perfect by yourself that anybody else would corrupt you. I'm the only one who knows what you need. I'm the only one who knows what's best for you. So she's got it warped in her head. And I'm certain that we could do an entire episode on the Morrigan. We could do an entire episode on literally all of them, but there's definitely an episode here on the Morrigan at some point in the future. But the idea that she loves him so much and she's like, I want the best for you and nothing else. I want nothing but the best for you. So you get nothing.
Yeah, it just so happens that the best for you is like to be under my domination and, even if it's really negative, bad for you. But what a shitty thing to say to somebody. The best for you is pretty bad. It's apparently the worst for almost anybody else.
Yep. Yeah. So the last issue, and something that I had alluded to somewhat earlier, and this is a question that Ruby had, was an identity forced upon him, or did he refuse the identity gifted to him and make his own? Now, I think it's a situation where he said, Nurgle? Now, screw that. I'm going to be Baphomet because I don't want to be laughed at because of his preconceived notion of who Nurgle is and the name associated with it. But it's the idea that he chose to disregard what he was given and create something out of it. And I know we touched on it briefly with the Baphomet and false god and everything, but just again, from a writing perspective, I think it's beautifully done. But Doc and Jered, if you want to talk a little bit about what it takes to say, I've been given this gift, but I want to turn it into its own thing, or I want to do it my own way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't buy the literal level of the text because I think that, I think Kieron Gillen's smart enough to know that's just not plausible. In other words, he doesn't want to be called Nurgle because there's some reference to some sci-fi thing out there. It's like, if there were real gods in the world, they would by far be more, it would rewrite how people saw that. It wouldn't be, we couldn't get past, well, this god's got a silly name. It's like, in other words, I think it would be the main thing that other things referred to. Point being is I think it's a much more sort of emotional sort of case where he wants to be something else or something like that. And honestly, there's so much self-sabotage to this character. Again, I think it's an interesting inversion because Nurgle is supposed to be inflicted death and disaster. And it turns out he usually points that self in this character interpretation on himself. So yeah, I think there's a certain level of self-sabotage here.
Yep. I don't know if I have much more to add to that, because the idea that you are giving a certain situation, setting, location, opportunities in life, talents, all those things blended into one. And then when you finally have some sort of autonomy, you say, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to make a left turn. I'm going my own way. I got this. And that's going to throw everybody off. You're basically saying, I'm willing to throw away my entire... I'm bringing it back to humanity, because talking about gods is kind of boring to me in that sense. I know that sounds weird to say, but no, the idea that there's a certain setup in life, and I'm not saying that everything has to go one way. That's not my point. My point is that if you take every single aspect of that and you just ignore it or push it to the side, and you do that for too long, you lose your support system. You lose the inherent things that are going to make life, whatever you want to call it, better, easier, simpler, more worth it, all those things. You're taking a huge risk. And as Jered has pointed out, that's kind of the point of all of this, that there's nothing wrong with taking risks, but at the same time, you can take calculated risks. Why do you have to throw everything away? So I think in situations like this, when you're asking, is the identity forced upon him? Did he refuse it? I think he basically said, I'm not even going to address the question. I'm doing whatever the hell I want. So when someone does that, it really makes it difficult to pinpoint what the next step is in terms of how that interaction is going to be. I'm going to give just like this real generic example. If anybody on this podcast listening or our current group together has had that one person, that one friend, or maybe we are that one person, I'm not naming or calling out myself, where once in a while, every few years, you just kind of say something or do something that seems totally out of character for yourself. Like, just people are like, why on earth would you even try that? Or why would you do that? And some people, it works out great. It's like, oh, wow, if you never took that chance, you wouldn't have made that money. Or, wow, if you didn't do that, maybe you'd still have a marriage. Like, there's so many variations on this sort of thing. I think it's inherent to what we do over the course of long periods of time. We're good with relationships in general. We're not good with stagnation. So I don't want to make it sound like Baphomet as a character is wrong because he picked that name or did things a little different than how another god would have done it or anything. It's just the idea of, if people are expecting you to act one way and you know yourself to be one way and you're put in a situation where you have to make a choice, at least make an educated choice. Don't just randomly let the emotion of the situation get to you and do something so impulsive without any forethought that it brings everything crashing down.
Can I add too? I think it's worth questioning this idea of this massive distinction between something like persona and something like the real you. Like, the real you is a relatively dangerous concept, right? I mean, like, there's this notion we like that there's secretly a me in here that has a certain nature. It's very specific. It has an essence. And then there's the fake social me that's out there, and it's a figment and things like that. And in fact, I think both of those are a little sort of like untrue, or they're mutually informing or something like that. So one is, I don't think that the case is that even if there is a true how you really are, that thing is very complicated. It's very in conflict. It's not always some unified sort of thing. It's capable of change and things like that. So in some ways, like, you learn a lot about who Baphomet is by the persona he chooses to create. I'm as interested in some sense is this fabrication on his part as I am with what we're supposed to think is this like dormant potency that's inside of him or something like that. But it's real fascinating.
Yeah, there's a book that I haven't read yet, but I'm very interested because it's come up in a couple of conversations I've had. The name of it is Personality Isn't Permanent by Benjamin Hardy. And that's kind of the point. The idea that, and psychiatry and psychology is guilty of this, where sometimes we create this kind of lockbox figure of this is how people are and this is who you are. Once you say that, certain things are never going to change. And the more we study it, the more we realize that that's not true. It's just more like it's like quicksand or just a mix of different things. Like certain things are going to move faster than others at certain points, but it's always going to be flowing.
And we're constituted by the world as well. We're not just, even if there wasn't just an amorphous interiority to us, we're also informed by the world. Our brains are created in some sense by the worlds they find themselves in. There's something really interesting about the way in which the rest of the pantheon makes Baphomet go into the Morrigan's clutches. Not to say that they're totally responsible, but in some sense, he's regarded as this like distrustful, evil lot or something like that. And so he finds himself. So I think in certain ways, like the circumstances before their relationship may have also constituted him. And man, I love this book.
And there it is again.
It's interesting though, because I'm not adding to the conversation. I'm just saying, this type of thing that we're talking about is really on the forefront of mental health, because for the longest time, we have really been trying to pigeonhole so many things into a construct that I think is going to end up being destroyed within the next 50 years. And I'm all for it, because my opinion, and I'm not going to lose my license over saying anything, but my opinion is that we have such a very basic and rudimentary understanding of the mind, let alone the brain. And yes, I think there's a distinction there, that we are just scratching the surface. So I love the idea of books like this, because they challenge so much of what we consider to be quote unquote living, humanity, all the things that make us us, and just stretch our imaginations to help us understand a little bit better what it is that we can't put words to.
Well, getting back to the point, first off, I love this discussion, and Jered, you are welcome back on the show anytime. Seriously,
yeah.
we're not even done with this, and I'm saying you can come back on the show literally anytime.
I love to. This is great.
But the thing that getting back to your point about the fluidity of persona and personality is, I think that's something that certainly everybody can relate to. You are not, at least from my perspective, you're not the same person you were 5-10 years ago. You're not the same person, Doc, you and I are not the same people that we were in high school, and I'm sure that the 15-year-old versions of Anthony and Doc would look at where we are now and be like, that's cool that you guys are still friends, but wait, you've done what now? You did Tough Mudders together? Neither one of you are jocks. Neither one of you are, like super athletically inclined. You've done what? You're doing a podcast? Like, especially, and I'm not saying this to denigrate you, especially on Doc's side.
What the hell are you doing, man?
That would be like, okay, cool.
You're speaking for a living? Are you serious? Your job is to talk to people on a regular basis, have deep conversations. What the hell is wrong with you?
But like, that goes to the point that I'm making, is that it's organic, at least in our cases, it's organic, and it makes sense of the character. And that's the beauty of where Baphomet is /Nurgle /Cameron, is depending on where he is in the story, he's going by Baphomet, then he's Nurgle, then he's Cameron by the end of it, because it comes back around to accepting and embracing, like right before he goes to Dionysus, to sacrifice his brain to resurrect Dionysus. Like, Persephone calls him Cameron, because to her, that's who he really is. And she's speaking to him. She's speaking to the person that he is at his core, not Baphomet, not Nurgle, not this performative nonsense, who he is at his core.
There's a profound optimism to that perspective. And I think also we can relate it to your podcast in a way, because I think that clinical practice, especially in terms of talking therapy and stuff like that, the underlying sort of value to that, I think, there's different traditions, but even since like Freudian insight is the idea that you can give people agency by them understanding something about their condition. Well, what agency implies, among other things, is plasticity. It means that we can't have these fixed natures if we hope to change and more or less be like the changer of ourselves. And I think what's wonderful about the series too is that the gods, not just Baphomet, but the gods break the cycle. And they overcome their more base nature that's sort of seduced by power and hedonism and things like that. And again, I think that there's this connection between this podcast, which I think is meant to sort of reinforce that kind of agency and understanding, and then what a wonderful book this is.
So I'm loving this conversation. And again, kudos to the creators for giving us such a fascinating work to base all of this off of. We could wax philosophical about so many characters, but I think this work is so rooted in that it just lends itself to this kind of discourse that, again, we could go on and on about it.
It's mythology too. And to give Doc some to not kind of give you shit, but hey, there's a reason mythology is so resonant with people, because you're taking really primordial, powerful concepts and throwing them into stories. And so if you do that well, if you get out of the way of that, you're going to end up provoking, all these questions about what am I meant to be? Can I change? What's death? What's sex? All that kind of stuff. Wonderful stuff.
But what does it mean?
I wrote 800 pages about that.
So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to plug a couple shows, and we come back. We'll get into treatment. Stay tuned.
Do you love movies and psychology?
Do you want to know what it would be like if Batman was in your therapy office?
Listen to our podcast, Popcorn Psychology. 3 therapists dissect blockbuster movies, available everywhere you find podcasts.
Hi, I'm Linda.
And I'm Jane.
And we have a brand new podcast called Bedknobs and Broomflicks, where we talk about witches of the entertainment world. From the horror movies Warlock, Suspiria, The Witch, and The Blair Witch Project,
to the more comedic or whimsical, such as Harry Potter, Hocus Pocus, Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, and The Blair Witch Project.
No movie, TV show, or book is off limits.
All witches, man witches, sorry warlocks, we're not calling you that, witches brews, witches of history, familiars, and witch-like activity will be discussed as we laugh and have fun talking about the wonderful world of witches.
So join us every other week for some fun witchy talk.
All witches welcome.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Whitley, and you're listening to Capes on the Couch.
All right, and we are back. So treatment in universe. I'd be very curious, Doc, what your suggestion would be for treatment for Baphomet, and if you would go from the mindset of you only have the 2 years, or focus on the, if you would, well, I guess I was going to say once the cycle is broken, but by the time that happens, he's brain dead. So let's focus then on the in-universe. What do you even say to a god who has less than 2 years to live?
Yeah, I was giving this a little bit of thought earlier. I feel like I've used this technique before. I think I would need a mole. I would need someone who is a fanboy or fangirl, and I would try and feed information, because I think at least the initial construct of Baphomet, is trying to attack that from a therapy standpoint. That falls on deaf ears. I think it's more along the lines of just saying, sucking up, or finding a way to do that initially just to get into good graces. And then from there, just gently nudging, which is pretty much what a lot of therapy is nudges, not hits to the head, letting them know that there are other things that might be as effective in terms of their emotional state as well as their interactions with others. So, in other words, if I could find who the number one Baphomet Nurgle fan is at the time that I'm supposed to have the interaction, say, okay, what I need you to do is not report me to the ethics board, and just make sure that you have this device in your ear, and I can just implant some things the next time you do your fan blog interview, and see how he reacts, and then spread that to Twitter and all the social media things, because that's what he'll pay attention to, and see if what kind of reactions those get. Then maybe we can make a little bit of progress. And ultimately, because all these things end up sounding like some sort of cabal that's plotting against them, because gods are incredibly paranoid entities by nature, then I'm sure he would seek me out and figure out what the heck it is I'm trying to do. Why would I be trying to sabotage everything that he's built up, all this popularity and all this other stuff? And the realization that I'm not sabotaging a thing, but I'm actually making it better so that his legacy is something that is going to last way more than 2 years. Oh, that might actually be intriguing to someone that's not exactly looking forward to that time coming up. So that's my initial thought. Or it'll go the way of the skit, which you'll see.
All right, fair enough. So out of universe treatment then, and this is something where I think Jered may be able to offer a little bit more insight once you're done, is you've got somebody in an abusive relationship, self-destructive, we'll say some self-esteem issues, which I think again ties in with the self-destructive and the abusive relationship, et cetera, but who wants more. And we'll just say that because in lieu of powers, obviously we're not dealing with any of that sort of situation, but who wants more and who thinks that maybe they don't have a lot of time left. So what are some of the things you would say to a real person in some of these circumstances?
There's a few things there that you put together in that package that I'll admit is a very difficult combination for me to personally deal with. I get a visceral response when a person is in a difficult situation that they feel like they're stuck, they can't get out of. But at the same time, we're on opposite ends of the spectrum. I'm saying to myself, I want to help you get out. And this person is saying, no, I want to fix it. I want to make it better. I want this, I don't want, it's obvious the person usually doesn't want the abuse, but they want the attention, they want the affection, the love, all those things. So my natural, and I'm not just saying this as a therapist, I'm saying it as just my personality. My natural thing is, if it's that bad, do whatever you can, find a way, just get out. But I have to be realistic and recognize that not everybody's going to do that. So I have to work where they are. I usually start with first, what's your safe plan? And this also is going to sound so incredibly sexist because they're called lipstick kits. But the idea is it's a small container that's supposed to be innocuous so that if you feel like your life is on the line, you have resources of where you're supposed to go, who you're supposed to contact to get out of an abusive situation. Make sure that person has that information up front, even if there's a huge, I hate to say this, and I'm sorry if I sound cynical, but a lot of times people aren't even going to use it. But if they do, that's a great step forward, regardless of any other individual therapy. To get to the therapy side, it also has to do with when you say they want more, well, more what? Do you want more in terms of personal relationships? Do you want more in terms of your job? Do you want more in terms of your health? It's sometimes people come in and they just basically expect everything to be switched up around, and we have to make it much more granular. So my first thing is it that you want to have more sex? Do you want to, not get yelled at every day at work? Create these tiny goals. Start with that and work your way up. And more importantly, make it so that the goalposts, everybody has heard these terms, SMART goals and stuff. I'll be honest, I didn't learn it that way, but it does kind of come down to that metric. The idea that what is the one thing that you can do today that you didn't do yesterday that might make things a little better for yourself? And if you can do that, and you do that every single day, and even if you don't do it every single day, if you do it once a week, once a month, that means that you've had how many? If it's once a week, it's 52. If you do it once a month, it's 12. You have 12 instances that you've made your life somewhat better than it was than before you saw me. So just that idea. So someone like Baphomet, I'll go ahead, I'll be Mr. Optimistic for once. So we're saying 2 years, whatever. I know we're talking about humans now. If we're talking like 2 years, what's one thing you can do every day? That's 700. Oh my God, that's over 700 opportunities to make your life slightly better. I can't imagine the types of things that a human being could accomplish if we actually were that intentional. So I went from being the total cynic to the total optimist there. But that really is how I like to approach people like that, because if I don't, my own personal cynicism will drag both of us down. That's been my experience with these types of cases. And they can be incredibly frustrating because sometimes you'll see progress for yourself in terms of how they're describing what's going on, and you'll say, oh, that's great, that's wonderful. But because they are not reaching what they thought their goals were, they'll get discouraged and say it's not enough. Like, just please, just keep going with whatever it is you have now. Don't worry about what you want later. Enjoy what you have now, and we'll work on the rest.
What was the question again? That was wonderful, by the way.
I'm awake. The answer's 12.
Yeah, exactly. But was the idea we're just trying to speak to this issue about this rather small issue? Is life worth living? Is that the issue at hand?
I mean, kinda.
First of all, I want to say I have no clinical background. I have nothing but respect for clinicians. So just let's begin it and end it really there. But also I'll add this, which I think that there is this weird hubris to depression, which is to say that we often think of depressed people, even people with low self-esteem, as also being the opposite of arrogant. But the truth is often the opposite. I had a friend who was a clinician, psychoanalytic psychotherapist, who would say that this is often called the you're the piece of crap the whole world revolves around kind of attitude. But in trying to approach this question about is life worth living or something like that, I mean, I don't know. I think there's this problem of so much about the world that there's no meaning to it. There's so much about the world that there's nothing to live for. When people have very serious sort of occurring at a bodily level forms of depression, they're what they should do is get help, go to doc, call the numbers they should. But when we get to these latter stages, there are also issues of meaning. That same guy was my mentor in philosophy. He used to be a clinical psychoanalyst. And he said after he got done with his clinical training, and not just clinical training, he worked in a hospital for treating disassociative young people and things like that. Really hard stuff. He went and started doing a private practice, people that were more or less psychologically typical, let's say. And he said a lot of their questions about anxiety and depression weren't issues that could be resolved by saying that you need to take an SSRI or you're out of this dysfunctional relationship. They had questions about what should my life be about. They had questions of meaning. And what I would say is that's for everybody to decide personally. But I'll say if you're a nihilist, let me tell you, you're not smart enough to be one. You haven't exhausted every text, every wonderful experience. You haven't seen the top of the bottom of the Adriatic Sea, or the top of the mountains of Nepal. The fact is that open yourself up to the possibility that you might find meaning in the world, and I think you probably will find it. If not, we're all going to be goddamn dead anyway.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Beautiful. You undersell yourself with that whole, I'm just a Brooklyn stand-up comic.
Yeah. Well,
Look, wait. Let's be real about this, though. In order to be a smartass, you got to be smart first.
And usually it's funny on podcasts too that I'm like, am I going to try to be funny or try to be deep? Am I going to be deep? And I just just feel it out.
And Jered just described pretty much what this podcast ends up being every other episode.
Absolutely.
You're like Baphomet. I'm very deep and meaningful.
Yeah.
All right. Well, and so before we get into the skit, full disclosure, I did tweet at Kieron, Gillen, and Jamie McKelvie, and I said, what kind of accent does Baphomet have? Because everything that I've read, everything that I can decipher indicates he's got some sort of an Irish accent or at the very least English. Nick Cave is Australian. I know he's heavily based on Nick Cave, but everything I can read indicates that he's likely Irish. So that's what I'm going to go with.
Mm-hmm.
So but I'm not going to turn him into like a Lucky Charms advertisement. So having said all of that, let's hope that he's not a late addition to the nominees for worst vocal performance. And let's see what happens when we get Baphomet, Nurgle Cameron, on Dr. Issues' couch.
Hello, Baphomet. I'm Dr. Issues.
Hello, Doc.
By the way, I'm sorry. Do you prefer Baphomet, Nurgle, or Cameron? I should have asked that sooner.
Oh, it's like that, is it?
Like what?
Oh, you think you can just drop all my names and see how I react to each one, trying to get a read on me? I should have known with your name you'd be that kind of a doctor.
No, I'm not. I'm not
Oh, you
trying.
think you're funnier than me? What the whole issue's name? Well, I can be punny too. Oh, I guess you had to head out early, huh? Oh, look, here's another person I managed to outlive. I'll add him to the list. Well, that lasted about as long as I expected it would. Might as well take a look here. What have we got here? A couple of cheap paintings. This stained glass, whatchamacallit. It's glued back together. It's trash. This man doesn't even appear to have one single thing work, anything in this entire office. Why'd I even bother coming here? All right. Marion doesn't know where it is. But I suppose I could stay here for a while. And I'm not alone. I can't honestly say there's nobody here with me. Poor man. He seemed like he was halfway decent. Why'd I kill him? Oh, yeah, taking a piss. For me, anyway. I don't think he thought it was very funny. He must be up to his neck in jokes, though, with his job. I bet I'm not even the craziest person he's seen today. I mean, I suppose I could ask him, but why am I even still here? I'm wasting time, and that's something I definitely don't have much of these days. I guess I'm just trying to kill time until it finally happens. I get it, Doc? Kill time? Eh. All right, I'm sorry. You really didn't deserve this. Okay, fine. I'll bring you back.
What the fuck?
All right, you don't have to blow your top about it.
What the fuck?
You know, you're losing your mind over this.
What the
fuck? Do you always repeat yourself like this? I think your needle's stuck.
Look, I'm a pretty tolerant man, but we just got started and then...
I know what I did. I'm sorry. I know what I did. I'm sorry. That's why I brought you back.
Well, I can't say I'm not grateful that you brought me back. Can I ask why you even killed me in the first place?
It was funny.
No, really, why?
Well, seriously, I wanted a chuckle. Humor's about subversion of expectations. I mean, you didn't think I'd kill you right off the bat in a session. That's funny.
Oh, if it were anyone other than me, honestly, I'd be laughing.
Laughing your head off.
You might be the only person who enjoys making puns more than I do. All right, look, now that we've gotten all that out of the way, what can I do to help you?
Are you a god?
The Ghostbusters fan in me really wants to say yes, but I'll answer honestly and say no.
Oh, well, it was worth a shot. If you were, I might not have brought you back and taken the time.
Huh?
It's not even worth explaining.
So, I'm a little messed up, but I'm going to be a little radical here, and I've never said this to a client or patient before. I usually take a measure of restraint because patients have gone after me before, and I don't blame any of them. I mean, a hurt person hurts people. So, every fiber of my being right now says just end this, but I'm going to admit that I'm at your mercy. The reality for all healthcare professionals is that we're basically your servants. We want to help. We're not your bosses. We're not your family or your friends. We have an oath, a duty, you know, like basically someone like me, I'll take that to the grave with me. And if you really needed a piece of my mind that badly, then I'm thankful I was able to give it to you in rare condition.
Hey, you just tried being snappy and insightful and process your own emotions and placate me. And that was the best pun yet.
I'm glad I could meet your expectations. So now I've done my homework about that abusive situation.
Oh, no. You don't get to be all joking and make something so serious come about.
Well, that's what you did with me in less than a minute. I mean, I'm sure you could do it again, but the same jokes get tired after a while, right? Look, you could keep the rock star gimmick, but Gotta refresh the show, you know? You made it clear it's too early to dive deep for you, but just remember, okay? If I'm not getting through that skull of yours, some other god's gonna crush it.
So that's it then. You give me advice and I still do my thing.
Well, only you could change yourself, but you're a god. You can change anything, right? Oh, did I miss the part where you got negative 50 HP in exchange for infinite mana?
Cameron would thank you for that. But I gotta learn how to have a bloody good crack. You gotta give me that. Well, that was interesting. I'd never done an Irish accent on a podcast before, so I can check that one off my bucket list. It's funny though, because I always said that if I ever did an Irish character, like if we ever get to do like Banshee or, you know, like a really Irish, like a character where I know that they're Irish, I have an idea for the beginning of the skit that is like totally humor based and probably would have fit here with this character, but I just kind of wanted to jump into the he kills you right off the bat kind of thing.
He definitely blew my mind.
Oh, but I'm didn't I blow your mind this time? Didn't I? The Delphonics. So, recommended reading is the entire Wicked and the Divine. Just read it.
That's right.
Just read it. There's like 40 something issues. You can blow through it in a couple of days. Please go read it. It is amazing. Just read it. Read the whole thing. So, next episodes are Killer Croc, Black Adam, and a thematic episode on Strangers in a Strange Land. It was requested by Matt, who just sent it to me about half an hour ago while we were recording. So, Strangers in a Strange Land, about displaced through time, space, what have you. So, Jered, thank you so much. And I do sincerely mean this. You're welcome back on the show anytime.
Anytime.
Yeah. This was a joy. I loved your insight and I appreciated the input that you had, not just on the character, but also just on the historical and sort of the meta level of it all. Was refreshing. And we're going to add a whole bunch of stuff like that into the show notes. So where can they find some more of your brilliance?
Oh, well.
And
that's a high pedestal. Like this is the best I've ever been on anything. So maybe it's only going to be worse, but that's fine. If you want to check out my podcast and with me and Noah and Kayla, it's the phantomzonepod.com, but that's Phantom with an F because like Baphomet, I like puns too. And really you can go on iTunes or Spotify or whatever and just put in the Fantom Zone. Remember, spell it with an F and you'll find us. We'll come right up. And yeah, I think you'll really like it. Hopefully you do. And I'll come back anytime. This is great. Anytime you guys need another guest or something like that, think of me.
We will definitely add you to the list. I promise you this will not be the last time we have you on the show.
Oh yeah.
So you can find us at capesonthecouch.live. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Capes on the Couch. And as we said at the top of the show, capesonthecouch.live/nominees. And there you can vote on the nominees for our 100th episode award show, as well as fill out the info for the mailbag. And we will be taking all manner of questions, such as, Anthony, how many accents do you do? Or how many accents do you think you can do? How many accents do you think you do well? Just watch that number steadily go down. You can also email us at capesonthecouch@gmail.com. We've got a Patreon. We've got a TeePublic. You can go to those sites and look for us there. And I think that's about going to wrap it up. So, Doc, befitting, if ever there was a character that there's a pun needed, it's Baphomet.
I mean, I don't mean to brag, but it's supposed to be kind of a interesting twist that you knew that it was really Nurgle in the first place, but I was easily able to figure that out because there is no way that someone like Cameron is going to end up the GOAT.
Bam. For Jered from the Fantom Zone, please go check them out and give them a listen. For Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.